Oh, hello, James Broad from the Tanith Fan Codex.
I didn't see you there.
I didn't see you there.
I snuck up using my camo cloak. Ed, when are you going to make the next Tanith video? It's been like 3 weeks.
I'm working on some Tanith videos. It's fine. I've got some on the way.
Well, you've got like 100 models, haven't you?
I have exactly 99 models.
You haven't made a MkVenner model. Make a MkVenner. Do something special for the 100th.
Ooh.
You make the model. I'll do the data sheet.
Yes, for the Fan Codex, you can make a datasheet, and I'll make a model to go with it. Right. I need my bits box. And here is my Gaunt's Ghost bits box, as you've probably seen several times. But thinking about it, before I get stuck into making this model, I want to have a look at what some of the other Gaunt's Ghost model makers, the ghost makers if you will, have made. And I particularly wanted to look at some of the conversions for MkVenner. And one of the common ones is to use the McColl model, the official Gaunt's Ghost model, which is fine, but that is an expensive model and I was really hoping to dig stuff out of my bits box for this. There is of course this Genestealer cult character as well, which is an absolutely fantastic model, really very cool, and makes for a very nice MkVenner. I know a few people who have done this, but again, I don't have this model and I was rather hoping to dig stuff out of the bits box. Strangely, I'm not the only person to use this model, although this picture is my own. This is the Sword of Twilight model from Mordheim. And every time I post a picture of this, people jump up and say, ah, that's MkVenner, because it is a really cool pose. But I think I can do better. It was really Scott who gave me the inspiration with his old model for MkVenner. Now, he has since made a new version, but this old one is the one that I find cooler. So what he's done is put MkVenner leaping off of this pole, like a fence pole or a broken tree. And it is a really cool pose, and it's very simple to do because all this is just some kneeling legs. The kneeling legs seem like quite an interesting idea, and I tend to not use them outside heavy weapons team, and so I do have a few spare. And so out comes some catechin legs, and I actually had an even sillier idea. If I was to swap a running leg and a kneeling leg over, I can have a character jumping out of a tree, pouncing from the shadows kind of thing, and that is where I'm going to try to go with this model today. So into MS Paint for some excellent photo editing, trying to get just a rough idea of what it would look like to just give me the confidence to say that yes, it is worth hacking up some of these legs to see what they look like. And some of the combinations might not look good, but some of them did have the character that I wanted. And so I went to hacking off the legs and swapping them over and gluing them back together. And one combination, I don't know, not great, looks more like they're stumbling than kind of a cool jump. But this one, this has potential. Strangely, the kneeling leg didn't have a belt, and so I end up with this kind of lopsided gap that needs filling. And I put a torso on to make sure it all lines up, and because nothing is as permanent as a temporary repair, this torso kind of didn't go away and became my MkVenner torso. Ven will also need some arms and a weapon of some description. Famously, the Nalsheen use spears, and MkVenner has been known to strap his straight silver to a pole as a makeshift spear, and that's what I want to try and emulate with him today. Going through all of my Cadian arms, I don't like the shoulder pads, and the catechin arms are not quite the right style for what I think MkVenner should look like. And so I dug around in my full bits box for some Empire militia arms, and luckily a spare section of wire that I can use as an armature for the spear. I wasn't entirely sure about the hand positions. The left hand probably should be the other way up, but you can tell me in the comment section below if that looks really awful or not. You can wait until the end of the video to see it fully painted, just to see if that helps or not. Now the staff I could leave as a thin metal pole, paint it as if it was a machined varnished pole, like a curtain pole, or I could add some milliput to make it far more interesting. A little superglue on the pole holds the milliput in place, and then rolling it around to get a somewhat even-ish wooden tree branch. And then with various sculpting tools just running some random lines to make it look like wood bark texture. Would a tree grow in a perfect straight branch like this? It's an alien tree, who cares? To make this branch a spear, a Cadian bayonet representing straight silver, as it has been depicted as a single-edged blade more often than double-edged, lore nerd moment, I stripped some electrical wiring and used one individual strand to wrap it around as if Ven has used some baling wire or something similar to hold that knife on. In scale, it looks close enough. And obviously every ghost model needs a cloak, and so another round of Milliput for us today, using one of these spare Catagen heads, which again, temporary repair and all that, became the head I ended up using. Although there might be better options out there, and I am tempted to change the head. I won't really go into too much detail on the cloak, even though it's quite involved, as I have a tutorial on Milliput cloaks already. But for a short version, a first sheet of Milliput goes on the model, kind of a rough and ready, which I leave hanging up to harden and make a solid base for my second layer, where I put the actual sculpted detail in, the folds of the cloak, because that gives me something hard to push into. Unlike my usual style of making a more pronounced sharp fold, I tried to emulate the style of the newer plastic Gaunt Ghost models, which maybe I didn't quite manage, but it is certainly smooth and flowy. And at this point I broke MkVenner from his base, which is fine, it was only temporary because I wanted to do something much more interesting given those jumping pose legs. So I braved the, I think it's called the Outdoors. I went there once before, seems fine, not enough walls, 4 out of 10. The Outdoors let me have this stick which I baked to kill any bacteria and started mucking around with a layout. The official Gaunt Ghost models are on 28mm bases because of course we need another new size of base, and I wanted to try to make MkVenner fit with that, and so 28mm it is. The tree stuck down with super glue and baking powder over the whole thing for added strength and some bonus texture, and then I used a pin to attach the back of the cloak to the tree. And this really is my secret piece de resistance of this model. It means that MkVenner really looks like they are jumping out of the tree, stabbing down with that spear, because his feet are not glued and rather he's supported through the Milliput of the cloak and the pin into the tree. Of all of the half ideas I've had this whole time, it's really starting to come together, and I am looking forward to painting it. And I've always preferred this type of thing to flying stands, rather hiding the support for the model in some terrain, some feature of the base, much more aesthetically pleasing. On to painting, and as base coats are boring, I've done those off camera, but I want to get the base out of the way first. The inside parts of the tree where there's no bark, I base coated in a light brown. That just gets a dry brush of tan, which in a moment I'll get a dark brown wash over it. The bark, however, a little more interesting, with black and dark green dry brushing from various angles to imply some growth of moss based on whatever suns this planet has. And I don't mind being way too heavy with these at the moment because there's more stuff going over the top. A dark brown wash kind of hides it all, and then my favourite thing for wood, which I've done a few times before, is a dry brush of white for some white moss. And I always go too heavy on this, but I always end up liking it anyway, because if you go a little lighter you can see those colours from underneath. But obviously the figure himself needs some paint. And what better place to start than the Tanith uniform, which has the most boring black. To paint black, you don't actually paint black, as that's just super dull. Rather, I have this very dark charcoal tar paint for the base coat. And into that I'm actually mixing some extra dark green to fill in some highlights. Any surface that's pointing upwards gets this kind of super dark green, and even coming onto a second layer to make it a little more kind of prominently green. So any fold, any of the pockets, the shoulders, the sleeves, anything pointed upwards gets this highlight. And to push the contrast, I'll use one of the finest features of my over-engineered painting handle, because it lets me turn the model upside down, and now I can pick out all of the undersurfaces that would usually point downwards with a very dark black. And so all of the underneath of the folds, the pockets, the knees, the armpits, all end up looking like they're in shadow. And the final step for the uniform is a black wash, But not just any off-the-shelf variety. I mix my own ink washes, and I have a very specific preference for this type of wash to be more of a glaze. And so when I paint this over the whole surface, it'll hide the transitions in colour of that green into the black. The cloak up next, as important as any feature of Gaunt's Ghost models, the dark green base coat has just a little bit of blue mixed in, and I highlight up with a desaturated, much lighter green. And I don't spend anywhere near as long here as I did on the uniform, because I'm going to be covering all of this up with the camouflage, which I'll get stuck into now, and this is just spotting and dotting, or as I prefer to call it, flecking. The colours for the Tanith camo cloak I use are just the same colours as the rest of the model has. The black, the tar, the white, the brown. It's there on the wet palette, so you may as well use it. And truly you should describe this technique as a deliberate stippling, but I like my name, and so I'm going to keep using it. Usually I try to keep this as random as I am consciously able to do, but this time I did let myself wander into the lighter fleckles being on the brighter parts of the cloak, and then all of the recesses with the dark green get the darker coloured fleckles, and this is going to kind of reinforce the lighting that I have on the model. The last real detail to fill in besides all the boring belts and straps is the skin. And I'm no expert, but I'm also not really worried about this face. As I mentioned before, I sort of want to swap this head out someday for something more appropriate. But I'll paint it up so that I can call the model done for now. And with the model finished, it is ready for the tabletop. But let's go and ask Jameis and see how he's getting on.
I'm back. Have you done it yet?
I have. I'm finished. And here it is.
That is epic. I love what you've done with the cloak. I'm surprised it can hold up itself. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I pity the fall that he's landing on.
Maybe I'll have to make someone for him to be landing on. My next Tanith video, perhaps. But speaking of what's coming next, that data card you promised me, is that ready?
Yeah. In the post as we speak.
In the post and on my screen. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is looking pretty good. And so here we go, Scout MkVenner as a data card. And we've got a pretty decent stat line. We've got weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2+, because MkVenner is expertly trained and very well experienced in combat. 4 wounds and 4 attacks is pretty standard for kind of a individual human character, although strength and toughness of 3, because despite popular opinion, he is actually still human. As for weapons, he's got his straight silver spear and envenom throwing knives, both of which wound infantry models on a 2+ because of that poison. And if you notice the Tanith camo cloak and blend into the shadows, between the two of those, that is the official rules for the Tanith camo cloak, but we wanted to split it up so that we can give some of the rules to the whole army, but MkVenner, of course, being as sneaky as he is, gets the whole lot. Lone Scout here, as anyone who's read the books will know, MkVenner likes to work alone, and that's just representing that. And now we have the most interesting part. Fighting the Like a Shadow and Lethal Ambush combination of these two rules means that at the end of a movement phase he can just disappear, and in the next turn he can reappear just about anywhere on the battlefield, so we get a little bit of kind of teleportation as it were, and whenever he reappears he gets to get stuck in with one of these last little bits. Assassination with some explosives, assassination with some knives, or a different assassination with some knives. MkVenner is very good at going out and picking up targets. And finally, the cool, which we've never really worked out how to pronounce, is part of the Nalsheen way, and that gives him a 4+ invulnerable save on top of everything else. So that is a data card complete, and also a model complete for one of the most beloved characters of the Gaunt's Ghost series. So thank you to Jameis Broad for popping past, and also thank you to Scott for letting me use that picture. But for now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you all very much for watching. We're getting sidetracked again.
Yeah, you're getting sidetracked. I'm ready.
No, let the cat be in the video.